So, Emma, what are we discussing today?
Well, we're doing like a get to know us, but more specifically, our different childhoods growing up.
This episode is called North and South. We're here once again to unwind and chat about parenting, sharing the struggles and celebrating the successes. You join us sat in our imaginary blanket fort. We've upgraded it with fairy lights for season 3.
Oh, cute. Or as Lily calls them, twinkle stars.
Sounds quite nice. I wish we were sat in a blanket fort, really. Anyway, it's time to grab a rare free moment and join us across the airwaves in our little
railway.
In the railways, in our little community. Whether you have a baby, toddler, multiple children, or none, this is Don't Wake the Baby. It's nice just to be back chatting again about parenting.
Yeah. It's just nice for us to have a chit chat together sometimes.
Yeah, if you don't know, when we're not recording this podcast, me and Emma, we just don't speak to each other. We just wander around the house, ignoring each other.
We don't
never
often
speak.
have intentional conversations. Do you know what I mean? You just go through life and you have to like catch conversations. And especially now, we've a very chatty toddler. When we're trying to talk about things, she constantly interrupts to add her opinion. Even if she doesn't really understand what we're talking about. She'd be like, Lily likes Elsa. And you're like, great.
Yeah.
That's a lovely tidbit of information there. Thank you, Lily.
We have a very opinionated 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, another one on the way. Well, she's occupied off at nursery.
She is.
And so we can grab a moment to record our little podcast.
Yeah.
Ba-ding-a-ding-a-ding-a-ding! It's parenting achievement time.
I made Pug jump. It's okay. It's just the crazy man who's your father.
Well, we should maybe explain that now you've said that because it's unnamed, we've called our unborn baby Pug.
Yeah. So Lily, before she was named, was called Pop.
Yeah.
This one is called Pug till we name it.
Very glamorous names we give our unborn children.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is the segment of the show where we share what level of parenting we've reached, a relatable moment, or just generally a parenting fail. I thought less of the fail ones this time as our first episode back, but more kind of just catching up with where we are as a relatable moment. Time has moved on. Lily has passed 3 years old, like she's gone past her 3rd birthday. So we have entered that phase where we now have to pay for her.
Yeah.
For everything.
Yeah.
Like, she was free everywhere.
She was, yeah.
Now she costs money.
She costs money.
Everywhere you go.
And she looks big.
Yeah.
For people who just like, she's a big 3-year-old.
Can't get away with being under 3, really.
No.
She's just too tall.
Yeah.
Like, she's skinny, but tall.
Some of my friends, they're like, oh, but my kid's little, it's fine. I'm like, no. When they're tall, I feel like we'd have to prove that we pretend she wasn't that age. But to be fair, it makes sense. For a long time, they're free and they don't really take up any space or, particularly engage with a lot of the activities.
I mean, in other ways, I think things are getting easier now that she's 3.
Yeah,
It's been a while since we last were recording and sharing our little journey. And in that time, I mean, some things we've had achievements.
Yeah, we got rid of the dummy.
Yeah, I know.
Achievement.
If you've been following us for a while, you'll know that that's something we were working on for a long time.
Yeah.
Finally managed to make it happen.
Because we kept saying before our 2nd birthday, before she's 2, there'll be no dummy, and that didn't happen. And then this time we were like, right, before she hits 3, and it actually happened.
Yeah, success.
We actually did it.
I mean, in many other areas, things have not changed, and we are still failing at parenting. Even though she's now 3, she still barely wants to walk anywhere.
Yeah.
Still wants to be carried everywhere.
Although, I will say, she does play her father for a fool.
Yeah.
In that, now that mummy's got a baby in her tummy, obviously I can't carry her. And she walks fine with me by herself.
Yep. Great.
But as soon as Elliot's with us, he's like, Baba, carry. So I would say she definitely knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
She's perfectly capable of walking.
But she does the same with you, like in terms
Yeah.
of like she takes longer to go to bed with you because she
Yeah.
plays around, whereas with me she's like, oh well, I'll have to go to bed. It's Baba.
Whereas with mummy, she's like, just one more book, and one more book turns to 10 books
Yeah.
that we have on a night.
Yeah. We're still not very good at food. She still doesn't
Yeah.
eat very consistently, definitely doesn't eat very healthily.
No.
Masses of sugar.
This is why, thank goodness, she's now going to nursery an extra day. Because when she goes to nursery, the 3 days she goes, she eats healthy and she eats everything they put in front of her. So, you know, I know it's a lot of money, but I think it's worth it in the grand scheme for her health. And that she's actually going to be eating nutritious food.
There you go. There's some updates on fails and achievements, the levels we've reached with parenting now that our toddler has crossed the 3-year-old threshold. And
Yeah.
since you last were chatting away with us, where have you got to with parenting? How are you? Do you resonate? Are the things the same? How do you find stuff? Just let us know. We'd love to hear from you. This is a conversation, so do get in touch on all the little places, the social medias, the things,
Yeah.
just message us. Yeah, I'm sure you can work it out.
You'll find it.
Yeah. And stay tuned till the end of the episode. We usually try and share stuff that people have sent in.
Yeah.
I don't actually think we've got anything this week. So...
I've got 2 funny stories.
Oh, perfect.
They're not sent in. They're just because I talk to my family every day and they all have children. They have funny stories.
Yeah.
So
Well, just join with us at the end. Don't skip to the end.
No.
You got to listen through the whole thing. Listen through the whole thing, and then you can get the funny
you know
stories.
what, see, if you skip to the end, it disappears, you see.
Right, forget driving to work. It's time to join us as we ramble on about whatever we're talking about today.
Yeah. Where should we start from? Should we name our differences?
Name our differences, yeah. I mean, it's something we do a little bit of each episode.
Yeah.
At the beginning, we usually give a little thing about each other, about how we're quite different. And this whole episode is kind of an
was gonna
extended
say.
version of that, and recapping some of the stuff that's different about us and some of the different ways that we grew up and experienced our childhood and how that affects us as parents today.
Yeah.
As a kind of reintroduction to the podcast. If you don't like it, tough. Be gone. Go listen to another one.
Skip. Listen to the next one. It'll be more parenting.
Shall we start with location-wise?
Oh, yes.
I mean, it's probably obvious from the title of the episode, but where did you grow up, Emma?
I grew up in the north of England, in County Durham.
Yep.
So I'm always very proud when I this is a big difference between me and Elliot. I'm very proud of where I've grown up.
Yeah. I really couldn't care. Could have been anywhere.
But I think this is a northern thing. We are like inherently proud of where we live.
Yep.
Even if it's rubbish, we're like, oh, but
Yeah.
we really like where we live.
Big sense of community.
Yeah.
Yeah. And specifically in County Durham, it's quite a big place.
Yeah. Well, so outside of Barnard Castle, made famous by
The pandemic
the
scandal.
pandemic scandal, where Mr. What was he?
You know, the eyesight guy. Cummings.
Because
Dominic Cummings.
Somebody now has a bed and breakfast called Cummings Corner
Really?
in Barnard Castle.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That famous place to get your eyes tested.
So it's a little market town, pretty
It
rural.
is, yeah.
You weren't even in the town.
I wasn't in the town, no.
You grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
I was pretty rural. I
You
mean,
were.
I was in a village,
This
quite
is,
a big village.
I always act like he's a townie. But he's very countryside-y, really. It's just in comparison.
Yeah. I always think, you know, I was in Gloucestershire, well, on the border of Gloucestershire, Oxfordshire, Warwickshire, Worcestershire, like, yeah. My swimming club growing up was called the Four Shires, because we're right on the boundary between
That just
four
makes me
different
think of
counties.
Lord of the Rings, you know? He grew up in the Shire.
Yep, there we go. Specifically, we moved from Bloxham in Oxfordshire to Bourton-on-the-Water and then to Stow-on-the-Wold, if you're interested, in the Cotswolds. There you go. And yeah, it's fairly rural. I mean, it's like a big network of villages and towns. And
Yeah.
my village was like 3,000 people, so pretty big.
Pretty big, yeah. I mean, people will laugh because some people will be in cities. But like, oh, 3,000 people, pretty big.
We're little country bumpkins, okay?
Yeah. I was even smaller.
Yeah. I mean, how far away was your neighbour? Like...
I used to count in fields, so I have no idea.
I mean, more than half a mile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You could see, so we had a trampoline. You could see the other farmhouse if you jumped on the trampoline high enough.
Love it. Yeah.
And I won't say, but we knew, like, you're like, oh, this farming family, like, you know, this from the surname.
Yeah.
I won't say them because that's, you know, nobody's business. But be like, that's so-and-so's fields over there. And that way there's so-and-so's fields. And across from us is this farmer.
Yeah. So it makes for quite a different upbringing, the location, but also like the fact that I was in the south and the fact you're in the north is quite different. And then, of course, you have your big family.
Yeah, big.
And I have just me by my
you.
lonesome.
Oh.
It wasn't sad, okay?
It was a bit of a shock to the system, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So if people don't know, I do have 3 sisters because obviously I'm a quadruplet, but I also have 2 older sisters as well. So and let's just say we now all have children. It's gone crazy. So my parents now have 12 children.
I was listening back to an old episode, and I think we said 12 then, but there's definitely been more since then when we started podcasting a year ago. So,
then.
I mean, are we up to 14 now?
Well, I have 2 great-grandchildren now.
Yeah.
Which I don't know, do we add them to the grandchildren?
And what about the unborn ones, the ones on the way?
So for people who don't know, obviously we're due one, and my sister's also due one. So that's 2 extras.
So, I mean, are we up to 16? It's just getting crazy.
Yeah, it's getting a lot.
Yeah.
And for people who know my mum, she just wants more.
Yeah. Just goes around asking everyone, when are you having your next one?
This may be a grandparent thing in general, but I think maybe at 16 that's enough.
The Christmas parties are really getting out of control.
They are, yeah.
It's getting big.
We're now hiring just the local, if people know Barney, the local church hall.
Yeah.
Is now where we have our parties because we physically can't fit in one building, really.
Whereas my parents have 1 grandchild.
Yeah.
Or soon to be 2 grandchildren.
See, for them, they've doubled.
Doubling, yeah. Big deal.
Yeah.
How do you think it affects like how we grew up and how we parent today?
I think one of the things is, I'm not saying I was deprived of, like, we were pretty, you know, we never struggled for food or anything, but we were very conscious of costs. So, like, you're only allowed 1 glass of orange juice a day.
Yeah.
Because orange juice was expensive. And stuff like that. So it's almost gone the opposite in that I'm very glad that I can give Lily
very
certain
generous
things. So I'm quite generous in that I'm like, well, we can afford that. So, you know, whereas I think Elliot's more like, well, we don't want to spoil her.
I think this is how I've ended up as the strict one.
Yes.
Because I had a very spoilt childhood. Like anything I wanted.
Yeah, you could have, yeah.
By the time I was certainly early teens, my parents had become quite wealthy in the grand scheme of things. I mean, it didn't feel like it when you're down in the south because everyone was pretty wealthy where we were.
Especially the bit of the south you were in.
Yeah. Also, like, just generally, like, we had a lot of facilities. So I find it baffling when you're up here that, like, there isn't a swimming pool in every village and town.
Or school.
Yeah.
I remember we were discussing this about, because I'm not a good swimmer and I'm generally quite scared. And I remember Elliot was like, well, didn't you go swimming with school? And I was like, well, with primary school, but we went like once a month because we had to go to the main pool. So that's an adjustment, isn't it?
Yeah. I think everything's an adjustment being up here, moving to the north. I mean, just like when we met at university in Aberystwyth in Wales, and even then, like, it was just such a foreign concept.
Even
north.
the weather.
I had no concept that it was cold.
He always thought I was exaggerating often when I remember the A66 where there were those big poles and I was like, oh, that's when it's really snowy.
Yeah.
And he would go, oh, yeah, it's funny. I was like, no, it's true.
Yeah.
That's why you have these big poles, because when it's really snowy, I like to show where the side of the road is. And he was like, oh.
Yeah, it still kind of amazes me now. Like, I was used to being really excited when we get just like, you know, a smattering of snow.
Yeah,
and I remember specific
I would say
years
our
when...
attitude to weather's very different, or was.
Yeah.
He's now on my team. Whereas when it snowed, I'd be like, oh no. Like, I'd be so dramatic about it because we normally had very bad snow.
Well, I've seen now, like, it's not uncommon for, like, snow to pile up, but, like, higher than the door for a lot of farmers. And, like, you literally cannot get out the house. And I was like, wow.
Whereas, like, everyone else went, oh, how nice snow. And for me, it'd be like, oh, no. Like, with the cows, their drinking water's going to freeze. What are we, like, so you've got to go with huge buckets of water And like, yeah, it just makes everything a lot more complicated on a farm and a lot of work. For all the other kids were like, yay, snow. And I was like, no, not snow.
Boo.
Like, when you're really little, it is fun. But I always had the idea of how much work I knew it was going to be either getting home, being at home and looking after animals. That it just makes everything so much more complicated.
Yeah. And, like, even things like when we first met, like language, your strange northern expressions.
Yeah, and I'm not, for most people who, this is probably a southern northern thing. I never think I sound that northern because...
Be interesting to know, wouldn't it? Do people think you sound northern?
Well, your family members who are southern think I sound northern.
Like the London contingent of my
They always
family.
go, oh, we forget how northern you are. And I was like, am I? Like, I am northern, but I never feel like I sound that northern.
No, I mean, I think because we know lots of people that sound very County Durham,
Well,
sound
even
very Yorkshire.
Where I lived, I didn't sound as northern as the other people
Yeah.
around me.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I don't know if that's because I've had to, because like my career's gone into languages, so I've had to tone down accents.
Don't know. It is funny though. Whenever we return to
Yeah.
your family and get together, your accent does get very much more pronounced.
And my sister, Kirsty, is still in Barney. Her accent's a lot more.
Yes, and just expressions and phrases and words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
True.
funny. Do you remember when we first were dating and we used to have you'd like give me little quizzes about what do these words mean, and I'd be like, I
Yeah.
have not a clue.
So like scrag was hug. A croggy,
Croggy,
which
yeah.
is when you go on the back of a bike. A skeg. So you
Yeah.
have a look at something. Have a skeg at this. I used to
Even things like lugs for ears.
lugs for ears. Oh, I forget. For me, that just seems very normal.
Yeah.
I'm just like, that's just what you call it.
And
Especially because on the farm, we'd be like, oh, a sheep looks ill if it's like lugs are down. If its ears are down, that's not a good sign in
Yep.
sheep. So when he was helping at lambing, you'd often say these things without thinking that you almost needed to translate
Yeah.
lugs for ears.
Yeah. Was nithering a word I didn't know?
Nithering for cold, yeah. See, look.
Even today, even now, I would say we still have a big problem with communication between the two of us.
Yeah, and
Because-
this isn't. Some people cope and they're speaking different languages. I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
yeah.
We're not that far. We speak the same language.
It
We've
is
grown up in the
baffling,
same country.
surprising that we can be talking to each other and somehow not understand each other because
Sometimes I just have to repeat what he said in a northern accent. So I remember once he was saying mast. Is that how you say it?
yes.
And I was like sat there phrasing, like, you mean a mast? And he went, yeah. And I was like, yeah, got it. Okay. It shouldn't be that hard,
Yeah.
but I think because sometimes your brain isn't used to hearing it a certain way.
And then you just have like expressions that are like local to your family.
Oh,
like,
my
that
family
aren't-
definitely makes
Your
stuff
family
up.
have a lot of stuff that and even my family do. My family
Yeah,
have made
yeah.
stuff up that is definitely not a thing.
No.
I mean, you have the Twitch for like
Twitch
a remote,
for remote
which I'm pretty
control.
sure is not a thing anyone else uses.
Let me know if any other families call it a Twitch. I've not encountered anyone yet.
The big one for me that I've had to readjust to is, even now I don't know what's the normal word. You know, like the kitchen towel stuff that you dry things with.
Kitchen roll.
Kitchen roll, yeah. Like, or paper towel, is that what people call it?
Yeah, paper towel. Yeah.
Sure. I think I grew up like calling it, what did I call it?
Towel roll.
Towel roll?
Because I
Or
remember
like,
it
yeah.
really threw me off before because you said, can I have some towel roll? And I was
So-
like, is that a towel?
So we've done this before where you've like, Lily spilt something and one of us has shouted for it. And like, I've come in with like an actual towel or like, then I've gone away and been confused and like, we couldn't work out what we were
Yeah.
talking about.
Then my family, we have my gran used to have this saying, which was like, show someone the gutter and they'll jump in it.
What?
Like,
Okay.
and I don't really know what it means. She used to mean like, show people the worst and they'll do it.
Yeah.
Like-
that's what I would interpret that to mean.
Basically, and I don't know if that's the thing. Like, I don't know if... So we also have a phrase like a good-natured cuckoo. if someone's a nice person. Because my gran used to tell a story about how one cuckoo sounded really nice and one cuckoo sounded really nasty. So now again it'll come up in like a turn of phrase like, oh, they're a good-natured cuckoo.
Yeah. I think somehow, I don't know, is it the nature of your, coming from a big family, you've kind of got a lot of inside things that have just emerged from a chaotic family where people make stuff up and share stories. And
I think that's why it's hard stepping out of the family sometimes and realising nobody knows what you're talking about. So my family, especially with babies, would go, oh, look at the little shumbumpkin.
Yeah.
And I, once again, thought maybe it was a northernism. Have never heard anyone else use that word.
But I kind of knew the word. But I remember we looked it up and we couldn't find any reference to anyone knowing what it was.
There was like some Dutch kind of fish.
Yeah.
There was maybe a similar word. And I don't know if I just can't spell shumbumpkin, but it's a thing my family has always said and I just believed was a real thing. And now I have my doubts whether it is a word.
It'll be interesting though, because we've settled in Yorkshire, adopted a northern way of life, and it'll be interesting for
I mean, we are in the poshest bit of Yorkshire.
Oh yeah, it's probably my influence of like, I'll come to the north, but I'll only settle in the posh bits.
Because like not many people around us actually sound very Yorkshire.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we're actually fairly urban for us.
We are.
Yeah.
Actually in a town.
Yeah. What I was going to say was, it'd be interesting to see with our children and with Lily how their language develops, how, what it looks like for them growing up.
My sister's children in Plymouth, they sound very ooh-ah.
Yeah.
Like Battery. Do you know what I mean? They don't sound like her all.
Yeah. It's interesting.
So it'll be interesting. Whereas I say Lily sounds northern, but she's very like me. It's not a strong... But then where we live in Harrogate isn't a strong accent at all anyway.
No, probably not. One of the other big differences between us is obviously that you growing up on a farm, you have a kind of relationship with animals and a kind of a perspective on life and hard work and doing chores and things that's very different to how I grew up.
Yeah.
So like I have a lot of fears of animals. I don't like getting dirty.
No.
I've never really done a lot of hard work. Manual labour. Which is very different.
Yeah. And it does make me, when she gets to a good age, I'm very keen to give her chores. I think it does help to kind of make you independent and hardworking and also kind of just realise how hard a lot of the work your parents do is.
Yeah.
So like, working on a farm, you'd appreciate so much your time off. Like, whereas other kids, they'd just be like, great, can do whatever I want today. Whereas, you'd be like, great, I've like worked all, like most of the day. I have like 2 hours this afternoon. What should I do with my 2 hours? Like, and I'm not saying like, it was especially at lambing time and stuff that you basically be working all the time. Yeah. But it is funny. There's a picture of us when we can barely walk feeding lambs. And I was like, so from a young age, Dad was like, go on, here's a ball, feed a lamb. You can do it.
Yeah, involved in the family business.
Yeah, but no, and this is why I also would quite like us once we've moved to get a pet.
Yeah.
Because I do think Lily really likes animals and she's actually cautious in a good way at the minute around dogs. I'm quite pleased. I know it sounds silly, but I'm glad she loves dogs, but she's not overly confident. Like she wouldn't just touch any dog, which I think's good.
Pretty healthy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, she has inherited my dislike for getting dirty.
She's ridiculous.
She's a bit of a clean freak.
Yeah.
Like me. So, yeah. That's on me.
That's on him. It's true, because like, as soon as she gets there, it's like, oh, quick, I'll clean you. And I'm like, no, leave her.
Yeah.
But now she's become like him. Clean.
I don't know that she'd be very well adapted to farm life.
No, she'd like the animals.
Yeah.
She would not like the dirt.
Yeah.
Which as a parent, I often find ridiculous when she's thinking about being dirty. And I know I just have to put up with it and be like, she just doesn't like being dirty. But I'm like, come on.
I feel like we're already like those parents that are like, back in my day when I was growing up.
She's going to hate it. I'll be like,
your mother had to toil away on the farm.
I had to help sheep give birth at your age. What are you doing? Sitting about the house.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm going to be like. I'm going to be like, I hate hearing about the farm. Hey, you did so much work.
It was nice that I got to, when we were
It
first
was.
dating, I got to see your farm before your dad retired,
And you got help with lambing.
and got to experience like what that looked like and see.
And you're good. You got to help with the selling of the farm. Like you helped go to all the sales and get the sheep ready and
drive a tractor.
You had to do all.
It was good fun in a way. I mean, it's exhausting, but
this is when you can tell you haven't grown up on it. It's very fun.
Yeah, it's quite fun for me.
Yeah, it was like looking back on it, it was a very fun childhood growing around so many animals. I just don't think you appreciate it at the time.
And I mean, I did have cats growing up.
The worst of the animals.
Hey,
No offense if people like cats. I don't mind them. I just think as a pet, I'd prefer a different one, but okay.
it doesn't help that I have quite a few allergies and like particularly animals and like animals with hair and stuff. I like have to take a lot of antihistamines, which is a bit frustrating. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what we do when it comes to pets. Don't Wake the Baby is a podcast brought to you by me and Emma, but also we are in partnership with the Kairos Movement, which is a organisation within the Methodist Church, and we're very grateful to both of those for letting us be able to do this endeavour and have a lot of fun chatting with each other and with you guys. And it's how we're able to do this through the support and kind of financial backing of the church. And so we do like to every episode give a little segment here in the middle where we just kind of promote what we're up to and what we're doing. We're kind of, we're a bit religious, but maybe not in the way that is stereotypically seen as religious.
Yeah. We're not judgy.
Yeah, not at all. We have pretty wacky views.
Yeah.
Recently, I've been getting all wacky over on Instagram. So if you want to follow what
if you want to hear people call him blasphemous, get over there.
Yes, I'm very heretical. Is that the word?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
There you go. I don't believe a lot of stuff. I believe a lot of stuff that's pretty non-Christian traditionally. And I share a lot of that on Instagram if you're interested in finding out more about that. But otherwise, this show isn't particularly religious, or you don't have to be a Christian, you don't have to believe in God or anything to be part of our community here. We just kind of share that as you getting to know who we are, because it is part of who we are, and we like to be honest about everything in our lives as we are with parenting. So that's kind of what we're up to. If you want to find out more about the Kairos movement, which is a kind of a place where we call home in terms of church, in terms of connecting with other faithy based people, and have conversations about all sorts of stuff. There's various different bits and pieces going on within that may be of interest, may not be, doesn't really matter. You can find out more about them on the website and on our webpage, where there's links to everything about what we're up to, and what the show's all about and why we're doing it, and about us at www.kairosmovement.org.uk/Don't Wake the Baby.
Well done. Very quick.
The links are down below the show notes in the places. Just go have a look, scroll down, go down.
Most people, if you're listening, you know how to use
Yeah. And my usual plea, if you could do the tappy tap things.
Oh yeah, liking, sharing.
Share this episode with a friend. If you turn on notifications, that would be fab. So you get to know when we post another episode. That would be really good. And that's what we want. Do it now.
Do it.
I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait here till you've done it. Have you done it?
I think I've done it. Well done.
Good. Gold star for you. Right. Back to the episode. So, Emma, do you think there's things that in the way you grew up that you want to do differently with Lily, or are there things that you grew up with that you're very keen to be like, yes, I want to introduce Lily to that?
A bit of both. So I know, and it wasn't my mum's fault, but she would lose her temper a lot. I mean, there was 4 of us, bound to happen. But I remember as a child, I was an older child, thinking it was very unreasonable. So now I really try and temper my temper. So that technically makes sense.
Manage?
Yeah, especially in my current state, because I know when I'm pregnant I have much less patience than normal.
I mean, I do too, because I'm super tired just trying to
Yeah.
hold everything else together in the house.
True. So I'm very aware sometimes I have to be like, is this a appropriate response to the behaviour she's shown? Which sometimes hard, because sometimes I'm like, but I'm past the point. So
I think this applies around all sorts of things, really, where, you know, if you're new here and just getting to know us, we're quite into all the sort of, for want of a better word, like hippy-dippy parenting stuff to a certain extent. You know, I think parenting, the trends have changed quite a bit since we were young, and some of what we experienced as millennials growing up, just kind of generally, not specifically aimed at our parents exactly, but a lot of us are quite into various versions of gentle parenting, of Montessori style education, of creative play and ways of
a lot of stuff
discipline.
Because forest school's really big, and I'm like, well, that was very similar to my upbringing in a lot of ways, because obviously I was outside a lot.
That's true.
There's a lot of things that are very similar, but I'm very conscious of remembering when I thought things were unfair and trying not to be unfair, which is hard as a parent, because sometimes I'd be like, well, why can adults do this and I can't? And sometimes you're like, but adults just sometimes have separate rules, and that's something you can't really get around.
I fully agree. I definitely had a sense of that as a child, that things didn't feel just.
Yeah.
But I think, again, these days there is more of a focus often on parenting, you know, involving children in the decision-making process.
Yeah.
So even though sometimes you have to be firm about things, you help your children understand why we're doing it.
Yes.
You know, it reminds me of a lot of Bluey episodes where they've focused time and time again on trying to, like, through different games, you know, explain why are we setting these rules, you know, like the Tina episode, or
and this is what's good about the age Lily is now. She's a lot more understanding of consequences. So like, well, if you don't do that, you will be very cold. And you could see her think about it and go, okay, I don't want to be cold. Like,
but I think that's, again, another difference. Like, I feel like, generally speaking, when we were younger, in the 90s and 2000s, there was more of a sense of you like, parents would they would do what was best, and they would enforce those rules. Like you say, if it was cold, you'd be like, well, you're wearing a coat. Yeah. Whereas these days, maybe there's more of a sense of you let your children make their own mistakes, and that
I think that's true.
it's better for them to learn that by them. You know, like, if Lily didn't want to wear a coat, we'd take one with us, but we'd let her go out without a coat.
Yeah, true.
And then when she found she was cold, it's
We'd
like,
be like, see, look,
there
it
you
is
go.
cold. Yeah.
You know, whereas we wouldn't have a big fight and be like,
No.
you have to wear a coat.
Yeah, that's true. This is controversial. We still do timeouts sometimes, but honestly, I think it's A, because often I need a break, or Elliot needs a break, and B, often she just gets so like
Wound up.
And
Needs
even if
a bit
you
of calm
do
down.
hugs, she just won't.
Yeah.
Whereas if she takes herself off and sits for a little bit, she just calms herself down.
Maybe that's another, like, trend thing in terms of where we are with parenting, how it's different, in that we're a lot more aware of looking after ourselves as parents.
Yeah,
like,
I think that's
almost
true.
we're doing timeouts not necessarily for Lily's benefit, but to allow us to just
To
have those
decompress
few
for a
minutes
few
to
seconds.
decompress, so that we can actually handle the situation better.
Yeah. And we're quite fair. She can put us in timeout.
Yeah, she puts me in timeout a lot. At the moment, she keeps going, Baba Cheeky, timeout. I'm like, what have I done? I've done absolutely nothing. I've just looked at you, and she's like, Baba Cheeky, timeout.
You're in the bad books a lot recently.
Yeah.
I don't even know why.
Just can't do anything. Lets people know where we're coming from with stuff, but you don't have to agree with us as with everything.
And you don't have to do that. Like, if you have the patience to cope without having a moment away, that's great.
Yeah.
It's just we don't often have that patience. And I'm like, I don't want to yell. Because I'm very good. We don't really shout. But I try and make a thing of it being like, I don't want to shout. I want to speak calmly, try and get her calm. So we're both in the same boat.
I mean, that's where we are now. I suppose then moving ahead, thinking about the future, again, about where we've come from in our upbringings and different perspectives on life. There's all sorts of new challenges we're likely to face as
Yeah.
our children get older. More recently, you know, if you've been a long time listener, you'll know we've been house hunting and
Yes.
trying to buy a house. And so that's a big challenge when we've had different upbringings in terms of money and rooms and like
So
what do we
basically,
want in a
if
house.
people know me, I think because I grew up with less money, I'm basically happy with anything.
Yeah.
In that I'm just like, it'd just be lovely to have a house if you know, like.
I'm just very picky.
And he's very picky because he grew up in quite a big house with like multiple bathrooms and things.
But now, of course, like we've got, we'll have 2 children, and like for you growing up, you were quite used to like sharing a room with one of your sisters. Whereas for me, as an only child and with multiple spare rooms, I always had a room to myself. So again, it's kind of different.
Well, it was even us discussing, because touch wood, we're in the process now of buying a house. But it was a thing. I was like, oh well, the kids will share the room at a certain point, and then it's like, they're going to share a room. I really enjoyed sharing a room. And I was kind of like, that was a really nice thing in childhood for me. So I envisaged that for Lily and her future sibling.
Yeah.
So,
well, I like it too. A lot of stuff I've kind of come round to your way of thinking.
I think it's sometimes you just didn't consider it. It's not that you were against it.
Yeah,
It's
not
just
at all.
You weren't, like, in your head, that's just not how things worked.
Yeah, definitely. And like it will be a different, you know, adjustment for me getting used to like having multiple children as an only child. Yeah, I don't have an experience of what that looks like in terms of how we do stuff.
Growing up, I obviously had to share, and Mum was very good. Like, if it's your toy, you don't have to, but it's a choice. But I'm very thinking with Lily being like, if you have a guest round, they can't have your special toys, but you have to share.
Yeah,
like, you have to be reasonable. You need to share your toys.
Yeah. I think we're quite similar on that front in some ways, and I think part of that's because, again, if you're not familiar, then both of us have slightly older parents compared to a lot of people our age, kind of almost a generation above where a lot of parents are, because, well, you know, our parents had us later in life.
They did, yeah.
Not actually that out of the normal these days.
No,
but
for these days, because
definitely
my mum
back in...
had us at 39, 38.
My mum was 37.
Yeah. Which, once again, nowadays isn't actually that abnormal. Most of the grandparents we know are a generation younger, like for people our age.
I think it's just like some of the values and stuff that we grew up with. I think our parents were stricter.
They were stricter,
than a lot of our friends maybe.
Yeah.
Get the impression chatting to other people, they've kind of, we have had slightly kind of stricter. And again, maybe it's just because, again, we're kind of country bumpkins and more traditional values. I don't know. But...
No, I think that's true. And it's definitely, in that way, my parents would view like our children as quite spoilt.
Yeah.
In that we're not as strict as they were. And like my parents still did smacking, like when we were little.
Wow, yeah.
Like, so it wasn't really, you know, it was just like that was the norm.
Yeah.
And once again, I'm like, it wasn't hard, but it's still something I don't think, like, I would never smack Lily. So it's just a generational difference, I think, whereas that's how you stop a child from doing something.
A big difference between the two of us, like you were in one house your entire life.
Yeah.
It was your family home, the farm, you know, that was where you grew up and stayed until your dad retired. Whereas for me, we moved around like several times, not as much as a lot of people, but you know, I've experience of moving house and uprooting and going to a different place and changing friends and stuff.
Yeah, I think I used to be more anti moving than I am now.
Yeah.
In that, I think I almost lived in a bubble where I was like, but I want us to have a home that's forever. And now I'm much more, I want us to have a home that's forever, but if our jobs were suddenly to change or better opportunities came along, you know, if it would be better for the family, I'd be willing to move.
Anyway, I think all of that said, it kind of highlights how we've come from different backgrounds, we've had different upbringings, different locations, different kind of financial things, and like but in a lot of ways similar values, but we've met in the middle and compromised now on stuff, and
It's true.
you know, we're fairly in agreement in how we raise Lily.
Yeah.
But it's just, you know, quite interesting as two different people that we have like different things that influenced our lives, and that kind of is what's a big influence on what some of the topics with our podcast and our parenting, and that's what's kind of the background context.
I think that's true.
For hopefully what makes our show quite interesting.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like my family sounds like one of those, you know, like in a book, one of those weird historical families where they have strange words and things.
I think I've mentioned before on a podcast, but definitely like when I met you, in my mind, like you were like the Weasleys from Harry Potter.
Yeah, you were
Just,
like Harry Potter.
Chaotic little poor family crammed into a house, and I was like this little kind of lonely only child kid.
Yeah, it's like our house was kind of, I'm not saying it was falling apart, but we always had a leak in the roof when it rained, so like we had a bucket in the kitchen.
Yeah, I can't say I ever grew up with a bucket in a kitchen to catch the drips that came through the ceiling.
And the only time it rained really bad, which if you lived where we lived was fairly frequently, and it was only in the kitchen, they would get a strip coming through the roof. Because I remember at one point, Alex was like, well, that's a bucket. I was like, that's the drip bucket.
The drip bucket, yeah. And weren't there things like you couldn't like flush toilets or something at this, or like there was some electrical thing where if you turned something on.
So if some of the taps were on, you couldn't flush the toilet. And if you turned the lights on in the dining room, the doorbell wouldn't work. I mean, like, we weren't poor, but it was definitely like we definitely weren't rich. We definitely had things like we couldn't afford to fix them, so it was like a cobble job.
Yeah.
Of how to do it.
But I loved it. It was like so much character in your family.
A lot of character.
You know, so many stories. It's wonderful. Right, it's the end segment time, where we're approaching the end of the show. If you're watching on YouTube, you've got to see how the craft has gone, and if you're joining us in the airwaves, you get the treat of some sort of parenting story or comment or something someone has sent in that we like to share back. And do you have something for us this week, Emma?
This is from Becky,
the sister in France.
Sister in France. Her youngest currently Isaac, because she has another one on the way, and how he started like making up phrases or words when he can't remember what the word is.
Okay.
So this morning she said he really wanted an apricot from the fridge, but he couldn't remember the name apricot in French or English because he speaks both.
Yeah.
So he kept pointing to the fridge and be like, I want a, and then he sat and thought about it, and he said, a friend of the apple. And
That's
she was
wonderful.
like, a friend of the apple. He was like, yes, it's the apple's friend. And she got his apricot.
Yeah, it's wonderful what toddlers come out with sometimes, isn't it? I feel like we're just entering that phase. Well, if you have any stories or tips or comments or things from this episode, do let us know. If you'd like it to be featured on an episode, we'd love to hear from you. If you don't send us anything in, then Emma will come and pester you and get a story from you for a future episode.
I'm good at pestering.
So look out for that. Yeah. If you're a listener, even if we don't know you, if we have no way of contacting you, Emma,
Who knows?
Emma will find you.
I could turn up on your doorstep.
Yeah, Emma will come and say,
please.
we want a story, please. Thank you very much for joining us in the blanket fort here. Go back to whatever you were up to, sleeping, driving, cleaning, washing, babying, something. And until next time, when we will be chatting about something else, I have no idea what. Maybe it's already out. Maybe it's still to come.
Who knows?
Go and have a look. Go and have a
surprise.
click. Sleep well.
Don't wake the baby.
God bless.